Welcome to the third webinar in our monthly fall series, hosted by the Celiac Center at Harvard Medical School and the National Celiac Association. I'm Lee Graham, Executive Director of the National Celiac Association, founded in 1993. It is appropriate today, since we're talking about nutrition and Thanksgiving is next week, to let you know about the NCA's latest program, Feeding Gluten-Free, which began in April. We have been getting gluten-free food to food pantries across the United States. We're right now in 25 food pantries, but our gluten-free community has a real serious need for food assistance, which has increased 2 to 3 times larger than ever before. I hope you'll consider helping by visiting our website, nationalceliac.org, to help reach these needy families. Thank you. For today, you're welcome to ask general questions through the Q&A feature, which is located on the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen. If you're still struggling to connect with us, tech support is available if needed. 857-282-6470 is the number. Again, 857-282-6470, or digitalmedia@partners.org, digitalmedia@partners.org. Also, this session is being recorded and will be available for viewing on NCA's website, nationalceliac.org. I'm excited to introduce today's moderator, Vanessa Weisbrod. Vanessa is the director of the Boston Children's Hospital Celiac Disease Program, working to build a robust community engagement and education program. Vanessa comes to the Boston Children after 12 years as director of the Celiac Disease Program at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C., where she led the effort to create national recommendations for managing children with celiac disease in a learning environment and research looking at cross-contact with gluten in shared kitchens and schools. She developed innovative approaches to education that methodologically allowed people to successfully adapt to the gluten-free diet, including producing a series of cooking and nutrition videos, building an interactive digital app for celiac education, hosting a bi-monthly podcast, and managing live and web-based educational forums. She has authored 4 gluten-free cookbooks and wholeheartedly loves gluten-free food. Vanessa was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2004, and her son was diagnosed in 2016 when he was 3 years old. Welcome, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today to moderate this forum. And thank you so much to Lee and the National Celiac Association for hosting with us today. We are all really thankful for our ongoing partnership. Today's webinar is on a very important topic: maximizing nutrition for all stages of life on the gluten-free diet. We have 3 amazing dietitians speaking, and I know we all can't wait to hear from them. Just one housekeeping reminder first. Please submit all of your questions into the Q&A field, and please only ask general questions and not specific questions about your personal health. If personal questions do come in, our moderators will recommend speaking to your personal physician or dietitian. So let's get right into our presentations. Our first speaker is Pam Cureton, and her talk is titled "The Balanced Gluten-Free Diet or Advanced Label Reading." Pam is a clinical and research dietitian specializing in the treatment of gluten-related disorders. She has worked in the area of gluten-related disorders since 1993, when she joined the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Her current position includes working at the Center for Celiac Research and Treatment at Mass General Hospital for Children and the University of Maryland Celiac Program. Her work includes coordinating the clinical management of patients with gluten-related disorders, educational programs, and lectures for the celiac community, physicians, dietitians, and other healthcare providers, and involvement in research projects. She is the author of many articles on celiac disease and the gluten-free diet, including textbooks, journals, and patient education resources. Before we get into Pam's talk, we're going to put up our first poll that will help Pam guide her conversation. So please select your answers and then take it away, Pam.
Thank you, Vanessa, for the introduction, and thank you, Lee, for the invitation to speak today. And thank you to all the participants for taking time out of your day to join us. So barring any specific technical difficulties, I'm hoping that I can share my screen. So today, I'm going to start out with one of the topics that I always go over with, even if it's a new patient who's newly diagnosed, or it's a patient that I've seen that's been following the gluten-free diet for years. There a lot of confusion about label reading, not only from the standpoint of, is it safe? Is it gluten-free? But also, is it healthy? Isn't it good for me? So to start, that's where our program's going to start today. I have no disclosures. So as we all aware, currently the only treatment remains a strict gluten-free diet for the treatment of celiac disease and other gluten-related disorders. So we know that we have to avoid wheat, barley, and rye. And on the surface, it sounds pretty straightforward. So we don't eat bread or pastas or cookies, crackers, baked goods. So that seems pretty straightforward, except when we head to the grocery store and we start looking at packaged foods. There are many not hidden, but overlooked sources of gluten that come to be a surprise to some of our patients as they take a look at them. So some of these things, like candy, for example, some of my patients are surprised to find out that Twizzlers, which is licorice, has wheat, or unfortunately Lindt chocolate, which has malt in it. So there's many products that can be confusing and sometimes are missed because we're not thinking about the source of gluten that's in them. So to help us for some of this, in 2004, the Food Allergy Labeling Consumer Protection Act required that companies identify in plain English the 8 most popular food allergens, and wheat was one of those allergens. So if wheat is used in any way, shape, or form in a product, it has to be listed in one of 2 ways. It can be listed in parentheses next to the ingredients, such as here, it's enriched flour, parentheses wheat, could be modified food starch or dextrin or seasoning. Any ingredient that contains wheat needs a parentheses with the word wheat or under the contains statement, capital C, contains. So that would follow the ingredient list. So again, if wheat is used in any of the ingredients, it must appear either in plain English or under the contains statement. So it has made grocery shopping a lot easier for us to find foods that do have gluten-containing ingredients. So with FALPA, when you head to the grocery store and you're shopping for your favorite salad dressing, and you happen to notice that the national brand of salad dressing is labeled gluten-free, but sitting right next to it is the store brand. The store brand is less expensive, it's on sale, and you have a coupon. So do you have to pay more because of the words gluten-free on the national brand? And not necessarily. So by looking at the ingredient list, we're going to look for these 6 words that would indicate to us if the product has a gluten-containing ingredient. So if the product is not labeled gluten-free, you need to look for, again, the 3 grains, wheat, which we just said is going to be identified, rye, barley. Again, barley's a little tricky, so be careful when you're looking for barley in processed foods. I ran across butterscotch baking chips, have barley protein in them. So in this time of year when we're doing some baking, be careful with that. Malt, again, comes from barley and is also kind of sneaky. It's in a lot of foods. Like I said, the Lindt chocolate, the Milky Way, candy bars, it's in Rice Krispies, Rice Krispie treats, other breakfast cereals. So malt is widely used in some of our processed foods. Brewer's yeast can be a byproduct of beer production, so it does contain barley. And if it's not labeled gluten-free, stay away from oat products. Oats can be contaminated with wheat and barley if it's not specially processed to remove that. So again, when you pick up a product not labeled gluten-free, you're just looking for wheat, rye, barley, malt, brewer's yeast, and oats. And that would indicate if those products aren't there that the product does not contain a gluten-containing ingredient. Again, these are foods covered by the FDA, foods covered by the USDA, which is meat, poultry, and egg products. are not required to follow FALPA, but the vast majority do. In those instances, you want to check out the modified food starch, starch, and dextrin. Okay, so as these children happily go along and run across this candy house, she stops to ask, was any part of your home produced in a facility that also handles wheat, milk, nuts, eggs, or soy? So this is the confusing part, and I think we'll take a look at the answers to our poll questions, if we can, for this part. And while I wait for that, I'm going to move along to discuss a little bit about what those allergen advisory statements mean, because they are confusing. So when you look on the labels and you see manufactured in a plant that contains wheat, manufactured on equipment that contains wheat, or may contain wheat, those are, again, allergen advisory statements. They're voluntary on the part of the manufacturer. If the manufacturer feels that there is the potential of unintended presence of any of the food allergens. These statements are not well defined or regulated by the FDA. And again, as I said, they're completely voluntary. So these do not take the place of good manufacturing practices. So the manufacturers still have to follow all of those practices to make sure the machinery is cleaned in between runs. And again, most importantly, if it is labeled gluten-free, gluten-free trumps everything. So if it's labeled gluten-free, it must, in part, be at least less than 20 parts per million, in addition to the other rules set forward by the FDA. So again, if it's labeled gluten-free, regardless of an allergen advisory statement, it is less than the 20 parts per million. And also, it's not a really reliable way to determine if a food product is contaminated. And our good friend, Tricia Thompson, actually took a look at this. So she actually published a paper on the allergen advisory statements for wheat. Do they help US consumers with celiac disease make safe choices? So she took a look at all the products that she had tested over time, and she found 101 products that were not labeled gluten-free, but appeared to be free of any of those gluten-containing ingredients that we just talked about. So of the 101 products, she took a look at those with an allergen advisory statements and those without. So those products with an allergen advisory statement, 13 of them were less than 5 parts per million, and only one was greater than 20 parts. With no allergen advisory statement, she looked at 87 of those, and only 4 were greater than the 20 parts per million. So again, her conclusion was precautionary labeling for wheat or gluten products is not labeled gluten-free, but appearing to be free of gluten-containing ingredients was not a useful predictor of gluten content. So now that, so I do see that our poll was split both ways, 50-50. More would not purchase the product if it said manufactured in a plant. So hopefully you can understand the what that really does mean. So after you've scrutinized your food label, so you've carefully gone through the ingredient list, or you have seen that it's labeled gluten-free. So now that it's gluten-free, but is it really good for you? So I don't know if anybody has missed this, but and for some reason I can't proceed. There we go. In case anybody's missed it, in January, you can look forward to gluten-free Oreos. So Oreos will be coming out the first of the year with gluten-free Oreos. So many of my patients are very excited about this. So let's talk about some of the nutritional consequences of the gluten-free diet. So unless it's carefully planned and thought out, the gluten-free diet can be low in fiber, iron, the B vitamins, calcium, phosphorus, and zinc. Keep in mind that our processed wheat products, such as the white bread or white pasta, refined cereals, those are fortified and enriched. So we add B vitamins, folate, and iron to those products. Unfortunately, most gluten-free products will not be fortified or enriched. So again, they could be missing those important components. Some other nutritional problems that we could face on the gluten-free diet: about 30 to 60% of newly diagnosed patients can be affected by lactose intolerance, and usually it's caused by injury to the intestines, the villi. So hopefully those will resolve as the intestines heal. Also, iron deficiency anemia can be a frequent problem. And again, sometimes supplementation will be needed here. And it's important to really look for those iron-rich foods. Reduced bone mineral density, again, from the lack of absorption due to injury, but also if you're lactose intolerant, then you tend to stay away from those dairy products. Unfortunately, a lot of my patients do complain about the unwanted weight gain that they experience after following a gluten-free diet. Number one, because their gut is healing and they are absorbing nutrients again. But secondly, some of the gluten-free product can be higher in fat, sugar, and caloric content than their wheat counterpart. And also constipation can be a problem due to low fiber intake. So how do we kind of deal with some of these problems? So once we get past the ingredient list, now we need to take a look at the nutrition facts, which have undergone a facelift and some changes that I think are very helpful. So first of all, right there, bam, right, big bold letters is the number of calories. So you're going to know right away how many calories are in a serving. The other thing they've removed, though, is calories from fat. They found that this wasn't helpful, that it's more important the type of fat that you eat than the calories coming from fat. I'm going to talk more about the line that they've added about added sugars, but we've also included added sugars as part of total sugar. So total sugar can include naturally occurring sugar, such as in fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. Added sugar, of course, is going to be things like table sugar, syrups, etc. They've taken out the vitamin A and C because they didn't find it to be a problem, but they did add vitamin D and potassium because we do tend to be low on that. Also, they actually put in the milligrams, micrograms, the amount, not just the percent of the daily value. And then they've also kind of explained in the footnotes a little bit more about the meaning of the percent daily value. So one of the things I need you to really look at first is right at the top, and that's the serving size. Now, for those of you excited about the Oreos, I think Oreos are 3 cookies per serving. No, I don't know about you, but I've never eaten just 3 Oreo cookies. So when you look at the calorie content, we're talking about 3 Oreos. And again, I haven't seen the gluten-free one, so it may be 2. So the serving size is based on what they think most people typically eat at one time. So your serving size, my serving size, and their serving size could be totally different. Now, and they also include not only servings per container, like this particular item you're supposed to share with somebody, but they also give you total calories per the whole container. So if you're not in a sharing mood and you're typically hungry, you know right off the top that you're not getting 220, but you're getting 440. So check that serving size. The percent of daily value is looking at what this particular item is going to contribute to the daily total. And it's there for help you compare. So in general rule of thumb, 5% of the daily value or less of that nutrient, it means it's pretty low in that nutrient, whereas 20% of the daily value is an indicator that it's high in that nutrient. So again, we talked a little bit about the sugar. Again, the total sugar is going to include the natural sugar that you're going to find in fruits and vegetables and dairy. But the added sugar can come from brown sugar, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, etc. Now, this is important not just in your obvious sources, baked goods and desserts, but we should also check things like that salad dressing, sauces, spreads, condiments, gravies. So things that we're not typically aware of that have sugar added to them. And again, how much is too much? So the US dietary guidelines, looking at a diet of 2,000 calories, no more than 50 grams or 12 teaspoons per day of added sugar. So again, once again, we go back to those daily values, 5% being low, 20% being high. So here again, most Americans, exceed the recommended limits for the saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and added sugars. And diets high in these nutrients are associated with an increased risk of developing some health conditions like cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure. So when you're looking at these values, you want them to be low. You want them to be a comparison between different products when you're picking up, whether it's a baked good or crackers or bread. These are products that could be harmful, and we should keep them low. On the other side, remember, these are the things that the diet can be low in. So dietary fiber, D, calcium, iron, potassium, those are the things we want to be higher when we're making those comparisons. So checking the nutrition facts can help you really get a better handle on how nutritious those are for you. So I thank you, and I'm going to turn this back over to Vanessa, I believe, and for our next presenter for Tara.
Thanks so much, Pam. That was great. I know that there are lots and lots of questions out there, and just please keep them coming into the Q&A, and we'll have all three speakers come back at the end to answer all the questions. So our next speaker is Tara McCarthy from Boston Children's Hospital, and her talk is titled Romaine Calm, You Can Master the Gluten-Free Diet as well as Other Needed Eliminations. Tara received her undergraduate degree in nutrition from James Madison University and Master's of Science degree in nutrition from Boston University. Tara has been a registered dietitian since 1999 and at Boston Children's Hospital in pediatrics for the last 19 years. She is currently a clinical nutrition supervisor and specializes in children who have to eliminate foods from their diet for different reasons, including celiac disease, FPIES, EOE, and food allergies and intolerances. So before we start Tara's talk, we're going to put up our second poll. So Chris, if you can go ahead and put that up, that'd be great. All right, Chris, if you could please put up the results, and Tara, please go ahead and share your screen.
Great, thank you. Look at that. Okay, so a few with 3 or more, lots of people with 1, which may only be gluten-free, but still very difficult to do. And then some other ones have several. Thank you, Vanessa, for that introduction. And again, to Lee for hosting this event. I'm really looking forward to it. So remain calm, you can master gluten-free diet as well as other needed eliminations. And sometimes this might be right now, and sometimes this might be down the pike, or it also might be just a mixed household, or if one person has to avoid something and someone has to avoid something else. So I have no disclosures. So what are the statistics? You may have heard many of these already. I'm going to actually set my timer, I tend to overtalk. So 1 in 133 have celiac disease, 1 in 100 children have celiac disease. And then food allergy, there's 1 in every 13 US children who have a food allergy. So that basically, if you think of every single classroom, there's 2 children in every class that have a food allergy. Per grade of about 100 children would mean that 1 would have celiac disease and 7 to 8 would have a food allergy. In 2004, the study was only in adults. They said about 16.6% had celiac disease and at least 1 food allergy. So this is very, very common for people to have celiac disease and some other sort of food allergy. So I like this picture because for some, we have to decide if food is friend or foe. And that's sometimes hard for me to educate families as well, because I want people to really enjoy food. And so I really focus on trying to help them enjoy the food that they can have, even though there are some eliminations or restrictions. So what are your worries or concerns? These are ones that I hear over and over. Can I get enough calories or protein in since I have to avoid such and such and such and such? Is my child getting all the nutrients they need, like calcium, especially if we're avoiding milk? I know all the things I need to avoid. Someone gave me a list of all the things I need to avoid, but what can I actually feed my child? And that's a really important piece. And do they need a multivitamin? So I promise to touch on all of these things in my talk. So first, I want to highlight all of the food groups without gluten and the top 8 allergens. So this is just one example of fruit here, very fancy fruit there. But I focus on these because I think they're things to think about to have lots of around in your house, as well as things to share so that no one feels left out. Another one would be, oh goodness gracious. Vegetables. So fruit and vegetables. And I know what you're saying right now is, yes, I know that, but my child is not a fan of fruit and vegetables, or that's really hard, or that's difficult, or that's not as fun as what they want to actually eat. And so what I remind every family member is that kids can't eat what is not in their house or on their table or in their lunchbox. And so I'm speaking to all of the parents. It's really our job to have these foods around and present. And then it's really the job of the child to eat or consume these things. So it's really a division of responsibility. We make sure the food is there and encourage, and then they decide if they're going to eat it and how much they will eat. But what we do know is that if they don't see it around, they're definitely not going to request it. And so another tool I use for parents is I'll say, give your child 2 options. Would you like a banana or would you like some apple? If you just say what's for snack, then they might go to the snack cabinet, and that's where you want to push them towards the fruit and vegetables. Another food group, the protein group without gluten in top 8 would be seeds and legumes, as well as meat. People get really nervous about the amount of protein. It's a big, people encourage a lot of protein. And I always remind families that usually Americans eat 3 times the amount of protein that they need in a day. This is the Kids Healthy Eating Plate for celiac disease. If you have not seen this, this came out this year in combination with the Harvard School of Public Health. They have a Kids Healthy Eating Plate, and we went to them and said, that's great, and we would love to use this tool, but we really need one for celiac disease. And so this was their first Kids Healthy Eating Plate that was based on a diagnosis, which was really exciting for us. And so I really encourage everyone to think about what their kids eat, not only in just every single meal, but looking at in the big picture over a week. And this is just used as a guide to help. So what's in dairy and where is dairy? So if you have to avoid dairy, what are you worried about? You're worried about not having enough protein, not having enough vitamin D, and calories. And where is dairy? Lots of places: milk, butter, baked goods, ice cream, yogurt, and cheese. And if you think about those things, I would say that yogurt and cheese is a lot of snacks for kids who have celiac disease as a quick kind of go-to snack. So now if you were told to avoid dairy, that could be an extra stressor. Of this protein, vitamin D, and calories, the biggest worry I have with the pediatric population is the calories. If you think about 2 identical children and one is avoiding milk and one is not, this child over here might be drinking 3 glasses of milk per day. This child may eat the exact same amount, but they don't have 3 glasses of milk a day, which brings them less to about 400 calories a day. So it's just something to be aware of because they need the calories for growth. Calcium, we definitely want to encourage foods that are high in calcium. And these just gives you a snapshot of what you would need per age. And that was very helpful for Pam to go through the food label, because we can see how many milligrams per day that they are getting from calcium. These are milk substitutes. And why I put this up is because, again, when I mentioned that the calories are important, we really encourage a milk substitute for the pediatric population. There's lots of different plant-based milks out there right now. This is probably in the order I would encourage. So pea protein or flax protein milk, as well as rice, hemp, almond. As you can see, though, the calories are very different. This is a rice milk that's actually fortified. There are several rice milks that are less than 40 calories per cup, and we do not recommend rice milk for less than 2 years of age. It's not just an equal switch. So if you took away regular cow's milk and you gave them coconut milk, you can see you're losing about 60 calories per cup. They're all pretty comparable for calcium, and so that's not what I'm worried about, but it's more the fat, the protein, and the calories that you would need to do. You'd also need to look at price, availability, and for kids, taste, and if they'll actually drink it. So you can have the best milk substitute out there, but if your child won't consume it, then it's really not going to be beneficial. So really, you might have to have a little taste test. Sometimes I also say that although we watch the sugar consumption, if we needed to, we could use a chocolate version of some of these. There's also some that come in little juice boxes of chocolate milk that you could send to school for them to take as well. What's in soy and where is soy? So we all know from the gluten-free diet that there's wheat in soy sauce. But if you get gluten-free soy sauce, that would be fine for people avoiding gluten, but it would not be okay for people avoiding soy. When we're looking for where soy is, it would be edamame, soy flour, tofu, soy protein isolate, which is again is in a lot of foods that might be dairy-free as well. And so just to be careful of when you're buying some of the substitutes if you have to avoid soy. What I would also say is my favorite thing to tell people who have to avoid soy is that soy lecithin and soybean oil are usually safe for people. So if a product, just like when Pam went over the label reading, if it says this product contains soy, if you go back to the ingredients and it says soybean oil or soy lecithin, those would actually be safe even for a soy allergy. What about eggs? So again, protein, calories, you're hearing that over and over for lots of these things that we have to avoid, and B vitamins. The problem with eggs and gluten-free diet is that it's a lot of eggs are usually used in a lot of gluten-free products in order to make them taste better and to make them more, have a better appeal. And so what I tell people is that it's a little bit more difficult to avoid eggs when you're gluten-free as well. They do make them, and so you can find some gluten-free vegan products, but they're a little bit harder to search for, and maybe your go-to products you might have to switch. There are egg substitutes and egg-free products. So egg substitutes, the one that I use the easiest to bake with,
Hey,
would
Tara.
be a tablespoon of ground for beyond egg. That's all. Yes.
I think we're experiencing some connectivity issues with yours. Would you mind turning off your camera? That might free up some bandwidth.
Sure. Sorry about that. Hope that helps. You won't be able to see me if I'm acting out anything.
Sounds better.
Okay. Okay, so this, I'm glad you were able to hear me now, for this is my favorite slide. So on the right is eggs, and that's made into a meringue. And on the left is aquafaba. It's one of my favorite things to make, especially around the holidays. So it's actually chickpea juice that you can then make into a meringue, and you can actually make into a cookie, which is really exciting. In the beginning, when I talked about the questions, it was, I know all the things I can't have, but what can I have? And so I really go through each one of these things with any of my families, and I kind of give them a blank slate and say, these are the proteins, these are the vegetables, these are the fruit, these are the grains and starches, and then anything miscellaneous. And so we walk through together and make kind of this roadmap of all the foods that your child will eat. And when you start this at first, you may see like, they'll only eat 2 vegetables, but they'll eat a ton of fruits and I have a ton of proteins. So maybe the next thing that you work on would be to increase the vegetable consumption, because you want these categories to be a little bit in each one of them is what you want to do. But as you continue to move through, you kind of add things to the list, and you can get your children involved with this as well. And there can be competitions between everyone. So the big goal is really to get in variety and lots of different things. This is a slide to show you. On the left is a gluten-free diet. If we took away the top 8 as well as gluten, that would be the middle. And you can see that it's pretty bare, right? And then on the right-hand side is what you would do to enhance that diet, to get it back to. And again, in the pediatric population especially, the calories are really important, but also the variety. So really thinking of not what are the things that we took away, but what are the things that we can add to enhance to make this a more balanced diet. The upside of celiac and allergies, I always tell people, is that there really usually is an increase in fruit and vegetable consumption and more whole natural foods, which I know that we'll be touching on in the next talk as well. But that really is the goal, and that's always one upside. Are you meeting your nutritional needs? Everyone asks this question. That's their biggest concern. And so I always say to them, is your child growing? If your child is growing, that's a great sign. Does your child eat 5 fruits and vegetables a day, different ones? That would also be a great sign that they were actually meeting their nutritional needs. Does your family eat a variety of foods, or do you only have that list of 3 different foods? That would be an indicator that you might need to expand your diet. And is your child taking a multivitamin or other supplements, and are they gluten-free? So do they need a multivitamin? That's always the second question. Are they meeting their needs? You tell me, Tara, and then do I need to get a multivitamin? So what I say about a multivitamin is that we always want to ensure, first and foremost, that it is gluten-free, as well as avoiding any of the other allergens that your family might have. What are they missing from their diet? If they really have a great diet, you might not need a multivitamin. If they are missing something, or we are worried, or living in the Northeast, we know they might need some vitamin D because we're not seeing the sun. Then we want to think of what type of multivitamin. There's gummy, there's chewable, there's liquid, and there's powder. Depending on your age and depending on the child, we would pick one of those. I really try to stay away from the gummy vitamins, as they're not always able to have all of the B vitamins in there, as well as not have iron. These vitamin and minerals, these are allergy-free supplements. So the following brands here that I mentioned, they were traditionally, and have been the last time I started this talk, were allergy-free. I did note that Kirkman Labs does contain fish, but I remind everyone, no matter what brand I say today, it's always important to double check the ingredients. Something could change overnight. I know my time is limited here, but probiotics I wanted to touch on. The following brand of probiotics are gluten-free. It's another thing that sometimes we don't think about. And so it's important to always ensure that your probiotic is gluten-free. This is a great website that actually sorts your probiotics by adults as by children, and then talks about the research behind each one, what's in each one, as well as what was it studied for. So whether it be constipation or whether it be IBS diarrhea, it will show you what the probiotic has been studied for. These are my 3 kids, shameless motherly plug there, but I always say they're my best teachers and my biggest critics, because they teach me every day what is good and what is not good and what they actually will eat. And so sometimes I come up with these great creative ideas and I'm so excited about it, and then they just put a thumbs down. And so your family will definitely help to tell you, if you keep you on the mark. Okay, so who is stuck on potatoes, rice, and corn? I wish I could see hands that were showing there, but I always encourage families that once they master the gluten-free diet, sometimes they do get stuck and just everything seems to be potatoes, rice, and corn. And so what I recommend is to mix it up a little bit. These are different kind of grains. And so what I tell people to do is that look at this list and say, okay, for the year 2021, one of my goals or my New Year's resolution will be to try one of these grains with my kids or my family. So let's rock and rotate. What I tell people is really set up the guidelines with your family and think about what you want to work on together. It's really important that everyone's kind of in at the same exact time. The simple rule I have for my house, if you ate it yesterday, you can't eat it today, which would stop the gluten-free macaroni and cheese maybe for lunch every single day. So then they have to at least start rotating a little bit, which would increase the variety, which would then make us have a better, more balanced diet. You may need to start with one meal. You may need to say, okay, I can't do every single meal of that, Tara, but I can do it for just breakfast. And then once you work through breakfast and you have 5 or 6 different breakfasts, then you could start with lunch. Move on to 2 meals, and then the whole day would come next. I don't live in your household, but I do know your struggles. Maybe your teenager's not a breakfast eater. You may have someone who just decides out of the blue, I don't like meat anymore. What I would say is that you have to take each one of these struggles one at a time and really try to do little baby steps in order to help out. There might be a fear of foods or anxiety around foods. We see a lot of anxiety, not only with the gluten-free diet, but also with other food allergies, and just worry about trying new foods or something they haven't seen before. You may be just like everyone else, stuck in a rut on what to serve for dinner. I think that's the worst question I can hear every single day. And it starts usually about 10 a.m. Mom, what's for dinner tonight? One child in your house, you may have, oh, that's my timer. One child in your house may have a low BMI, and one child in your house may have a high BMI. So you're really balancing those two things. You may have one kid that eats anything and another one is picky. And so you don't know who to really focus on. And I really would say take it as a family approach. Trying to please so many people. We all do that in our household. And it's so busy, it's hard to work on this too. And so what I tell people is that just try to push nutrition to be one notch higher than you could. I'm afraid my kids are not going to get the right amount of something, whatever that might be. So my plug for nutrition is actually a consultation with a dietitian who's skilled in celiac disease. It's one of the 6 main principles set forth by the NIH. Ongoing follow-up is essential, especially if you also have multiple food allergies. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry for my little glitch.
Thanks, Tara, so much. Before we let you go, there have been quite a few questions about soy milk that have come up. It wasn't on the substitute. So if you could just clarify that for everybody before you go, that'd be great.
Perfect. So sorry. So I didn't put it on the substitute for one main reason is because most of the children I see have multiple food allergies. And so soy is one of the top 8, which is why it's not on there, but it is a great substitute. If you can't have dairy, but you can have soy, that's absolutely fine. Hope that clarified it.
Great, thank you. That was perfect.
Okay.
So our final speaker today is Melinda Dennis, and her talk is titled The Gluten-Free Diet, Rounding It Out. Melinda is the nutrition coordinator for the Celiac Center at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Diagnosed with celiac disease 30 years ago, Ms. Dennis specializes in the nutritional treatment of patients with gluten-related disorders. She lectures nationally and is program director of the nutrition and medical website celiacnow.org. Melinda served on the executive council of the Society for the Study of Celiac Disease and is currently a task force member of the SSCD's Patient Resources and Literature Committee and of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Practice Group, Dietitians in Medical Nutrition Therapy. She is co-author of the book Real Life with Celiac Disease, published by the AGA. She is founder, former chair, and the current senior nutrition advisor to the National Celiac Association and serves on the executive committees of the Celiac Research Program at Harvard Medical School and of Food and Health. Through her consulting business, Delete the Wheat, she offers educational webinars, gluten-free wellness retreats, and consulting assistance to food and pharmaceutical companies. Before we jump into Melinda's talk, we're going to put up our final poll. So Chris, please put up the question.
Okay. Vanessa, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to jump right in after thanking everyone for having us today. And can you hear me okay? So
Yep, sounds good.
These are my disclosures for the presentation today. Okay, so we've all heard the message that getting enough fiber, which is the undigested and unabsorbed part of plants, is a critical part of a healthy diet, and that Americans don't get enough. And we know that fiber helps with blood sugar and blood pressure control and helps to decrease the risk of coronary heart disease and cardiovascular and all-cause mortality, colorectal cancer and stroke and type 2 diabetes. We also know that it fills you up on fewer calories and can help with constipation. Today, I'm going to talk mainly about fiber from foods, and I'll focus primarily on the benefits of the gluten-free grains and the pseudo grains, which are seeds which act as grains. And I am delighted to see that the poll is up. And yes, thank you for that information. You can use that later on. So of course, grains are not tolerated by everyone or preferred by everyone. Fiber, among other factors, can exacerbate symptoms of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and certain conditions need low fiber diets or a more or less of a particular type of fiber. With careful planning, it's possible to balance a diet with minimal or modified fiber and grains if it's necessary. But the biggest issue in our celiac population is the choice of the gluten-free grains that we're making and the starches and their consequences. So as you've seen, without careful planning, the gluten-free diet can be at risk for micro and macro deficiencies. It's common for those on the gluten-free diet to not meet their fiber needs, especially if they include the refined grains or starches or flours instead of the whole grain. And a refined grain has had its nutrient-dense bran and the germ removed and leaving only the starchy center. So examples, as you heard, were white rice flour, rice starch, milled corn, cornstarch. And weight gain is likely in our population because of a combination of increased nutrient absorption as your small intestine heals and the reliance on the gluten-free products that are often made from these refined starches and higher in fat and sugar and salt compared to the wheat-based ones. And as Pam had mentioned to you, some but not many of the refined gluten-free products have been enriched and fortified with B vitamins, folate, calcium, and iron. But that's something that you can see in the new ingredients list if you look at that. So gluten-free breads and pastas differ in their nutritional quality from gluten-containing ones. and they can have significantly more ingredients. If you look in this 2018 UK study, on the left, there are 20 different ingredients used to make a gluten-free bread compared to 14 ingredients to make a gluten-containing bread, which is not shown here. On the right, you'll see 8 different ingredients used to make gluten-free pasta compared with only 1 for gluten-free pasta, which is also not shown. And in this 2018 study by Lee of 50 patients with biopsy-confirmed celiac, a greater variety of the alternative grains such as quinoa, the oats, teff, millet, and also brown rice were consumed, but 88% of the alternative grain intake was in the ultra-processed forms of bars and cereals and sweet treats and breads and crackers, most of which also contain added sugar. The fiber recommendations are based on gender, age, medical conditions, and calories consumed, among other factors. They decrease typically as we get older with the assumption that fewer calories are being eaten, so less fiber is needed. But if a person exercises less as he ages and perhaps leads to constipation, then he may benefit from a little more fiber. So as you can see, these needs are very individualized. You can use this chart to help you estimate your needs, but your body and your bowel movements are going to know the best. Always increase your fiber intake slowly, such as adding 1 serving of whole fruit to your meals for a few days. This will allow your gut to adjust to the unpleasant GI symptoms such as cramping and gas that might happen. And don't forget to drink the water spaced throughout the day to prevent the constipation. So there are so many gluten-free grains and pseudo grains. It's just a matter of getting familiar with them. You saw on Tara's slide several of those listed. Those listed here in green are the highest in fiber, the vitamins, and the minerals. Oats aren't listed on this chart because I don't have time to talk about them today, but the decision to when, if, and how to include labeled pure uncontaminated gluten-free oats is best made with your celiac doctor or dietitian. I wanted to highlight 3 high fiber winners. Amaranth, which is a pseudo grain, was a superfood for warriors 8,000 years ago. It has 3 times more fiber and 5 times more iron than wheat. It lowers blood pressure and cholesterol, and it's a whole protein, which makes it a great choice for vegans and vegetarians. You can add it to soups and stews and casseroles or risotto to thicken them. You can cook it as a hot whole grain cereal or puff it for cold cereal. You can pop it like popcorn or bake bread or muffins with the flour. Because it's 90% digestibility, it makes it suitable for upset stomachs. And if you wanted to sprout that, you could increase the digestibility even further. So teff, the smallest grain in the world, comes from North Africa on the bottom left. It's used to make injera, which is a chewy Ethiopian flatbread. Has a nutty molasses-like flavor, and it's a powerhouse of calcium, iron, protein, fiber, and magnesium, B1, and zinc. So you can combine 25 to 50% of teff with other flours to bake healthy pie crusts or cookies. You could use it as a whole grain gluten-free hot cereal or make veggie burgers with it. You can add it to rice and you elevate the vitamin and mineral content to a whole new level. Millet in the bottom right, millet seeds are a staple of the Far East and they're closely related to corn. They're small, round, and come in many, many colors. Millet has a mild corn-like nutty flavor. It's easily digested also. You can toast it, make hot cereal or puffed cold cereal, use it as a side dish or a pilaf instead of rice, or you could stuff it in with diced veggies and mint into peppers or hollowed out squash and drizzle it with olive oil and lemon juice. So millet is high in so many things: B1, B2, B3, B6, folate, iron, magnesium, and zinc. How am I doing on time? Nice. So here are a few strategies to reduce refined products and choose the whole grains. If you consume at least half of your gluten-free grains each day from whole grain sources, that would be one step. Whenever possible, you can select foods that list the word whole gluten-free grain or flour made from them as the first ingredient, or the second ingredient if it comes after water. The closer they are to the top of the ingredient list, the better. And as a practical tip, you could try to find products with 3 or more grams of fiber per serving, or look for the whole grain stamp, which you see here on the slide. Of course, with the exception of plain rice, it's really important for us to remember that we must look for labeled gluten-free grains, flours, and grain-based foods to avoid the cross-contact with the gluten-containing grains during harvest, transport, and production. And whenever possible, if you can do the same for nut flours and legume flours, such as lentil flour, it is a good idea. So really quickly, just to see the chart, there's a significant difference in fiber between white rice and the alternative grains you see here in their whole form. Unless rice is enriched, it's lower in folate and iron. And this is important because approximately 50% of women's needs in the US come from iron, 50% of the iron needs come from wheat-based products for women in the United States. And many of the gluten-free products aren't fortified with this, nor are they fortified with folic acid, though this is changing. Another reason to reduce the amount of rice products you eat and rotate in the other grains is because of the concern about the potential exposure to increased arsenic and other heavy metals in the celiac population due to our higher intake of rice and rice-based products. So rinsing your rice and several other techniques to reduce arsenic in rice are explained on the Dartmouth website called Arsenic and You, which I've listed in your references, and those will be available. B vitamins are extremely important for brain, muscle, heart, digestive, and fetal health, as well as multiple other body processes. And whole grain and whole enriched wheat flour have a very robust profile of B vitamins. So in order to make up for this, that we're no longer eating, we want to rotate in the gluten-free grains and not just call one of them our new wheat, for example. I wanted to spend a few minutes on legumes today. Legumes include all kinds of dried beans, all kinds of dried peas, including chickpeas and split peas, as well as lentils. In Canada, these are called pulses. They're an excellent source of fiber, vitamins and minerals that are listed here, and protein, especially when they're combined with whole gluten-free grains. Since they have both complex carbs and protein, they maintain healthy blood glucose levels and insulin levels, which is great for people with diabetes. The lectins and phytates are 2 of several compounds that are found naturally in legumes and grains, as well as some vegetables. And they can interfere with the body's ability to fully absorb foods, fully absorb the nutrients such as iron and other minerals from these foods. So to simplify for today's talk, because we don't have a lot of time, soaking, rinsing, draining, cooking fully, and in some cases sprouting can all help in varying amounts to reduce lectins and phytates, to increase the bioavailability of the nutrients from these legumes and from these grains, and to reduce the unpleasant side effects of gas or cramping that so often come with eating these foods. Rinsing and draining also will reduce the sodium content in canned legumes. And as with grains, it's really important to drink extra water, make any diet changes very slowly, watch for symptoms such as gas, and cut back if needed. Please see your references to learn more about the legumes and those compounds I talked about. So to the bottom of the page, according to the Grain Inspection, Packers, and Stockyards Administration standards, lentils are allowed to contain a certain percentage of foreign grain, including wheat, barley, and rye. Per Gluten-Free Watchdog, which is an organization that tests labeled gluten-free products and non-labeled gluten-free products, whether of lentils are labeled gluten-free or not, the recommendation is to pour dried lentils onto a cookie sheet and sort through them for rocks and gluten-containing grains, and then rinse and drain them well under running water. You want to rinse and drain canned lentils very well too. Gluten-Free Watchdog thinks actually that all legumes should really be sorted and rinsed and drained, but right now the biggest issue is with lentils. So when possible, look for the gluten-free ones, but as you know, you will not find very many. And regardless, rinse and drain and wash. See Gluten-Free Watchdog for more information on that. Checking my time. Okay. So water benefits the body in countless ways. We're made up of 60% water ourselves, and this water is lost through urine, skin, breathing, and stool every day. This image reminds us to drink fluids, particularly water, especially as we add fiber. Diet, climate, activity, medical conditions, and other factors determine how much fluid you need. There is confusion among the public and healthcare providers about how much water we should be drinking. And I'm just going to give you some data, right, to think about. According to UpToDate, the average adult should have a minimum required water intake of about 6.6 cups a day. This is composed of water we drink, water in food, and water our bodies convert from carbohydrates. The Mayo Clinic and the chart you see on the slide from the Institute of Medicine recommend between 13 to 15.5 cups a day of total fluids for men and between 9 and 11.5 cups a day for women. And these total fluids, again, a combination of water, beverages, and foods that contain water. So it's reasonable to aim for a fluid intake from water and non-dehydrating beverages within those ranges, depending on your individual needs. These recommendations are for healthy people on a normal diet, for people with GI symptoms or who aren't eating quite enough or taking certain medications. Drinking too much water can lead to electrolyte imbalance. So your doctor and dietitian can help you determine your own fluid needs. Space your fluids through the day. Whenever possible, shift to healthier beverages like water, unsweetened teas, and flavored water without added sugar. I did a quick makeover here. In the standard American diet on the left, you can see I changed cold cereal to hot whole grain cereal. Chose calcium fortified almond milk and plain Greek yogurt, which has more protein than regular yogurt and usually no added sugars. You can also add your own fruit, such as berries. I also added healthy fats with nuts and seeds. At lunch, I switched the sweetened deli meat to a high protein, high fiber chili and added whole gluten-free grain with avocado as the healthy fat. I added whole fruit and changed the sweetened drink to water in this case. In keeping with the American Heart Association, the 2015-2020 dietary guidelines and the Mediterranean diet included fish, in this case salmon, which happens to be high in omega-3s. I chose a non-rice-based pasta, added veggies, and switched in a homemade dressing. The snacks are simple and easy to make and full of vitamins and minerals and sometimes fiber. So 2 important points for this. 1, this person needs to make sure they include adequate calcium and vitamin D. And I would not make all these changes at once. You're given the significant increase in fiber that you see here. I know I don't have very little time left, but I wanted to quickly turn to digestion. It can be a frantic 4-lane highway that's negatively impacted by our medical conditions, stress and lifestyle, sleep patterns, medications, and foods and drinks, just to name a few. Some people notice that certain foods, such as coffee or caffeine, alcohol, fatty foods, fried foods, and large meals stimulate their gut movement and sometimes pain or reflux. And some people are sensitive to lactose, fructose, sorbitol, and other fermentable carbohydrates. Others need to avoid allergens, like you heard with Tara, or carefully watch the type of fiber that they consume. But despite all these factors, we actually have a lot of control over our own digestion. And several patients have told me that dining out less due to the pandemic has cleared up many of their GI symptoms. It's a perfect example of how gaining control over what we put in our mouths, in this case limiting gluten exposure, improves our gut function. So let's just look at a couple tools as I close. Stool is one of your best indicators of health. The Bristol Stool Scale is a medical tool used by clinicians to classify the different shapes and the type of stool to help diagnose certain digestive problems. Type 1 and 2 indicate constipation. Type 3 and 4 are ideal, especially type 4, because they're easy to pass without containing excess liquid. And type 5 to 7 tend towards diarrhea. So you want to pay attention to your stool. Always tell your doctor if you see stool on the blood, if you see blood, excuse me, on the toilet paper or in the toilet or mixed in with the stool, or as well as any other concerning issues, such as the one listed on this Bristol, on this slide. And again, that is the Bristol stool scale. Whether it's on an app or a piece of paper, a food log is used to record food and beverage you consume and any symptoms that you might experience. Your doctor and dietitian can study this chart to help zero in on possible dietary causes for any symptoms you might be having. And finally, to close, just a few digestive tips. Chew your food really, really well. Digestion begins in the mouth when salivary enzymes are released. Exercise, not just for your brain and your body, but for your gut. Avoid large meals and pay attention to foods that commonly cause heartburn, chocolate, caffeine, onions, fried or fatty foods, alcohol, and peppermint. And whenever possible, fill up first on nutrient-rich foods. Avoid the late night eating and the lying down after eating to help prevent the heartburn and also keep your weight in check. And finally, enjoy relaxation and self-care, whatever that is meaningful to you. You'll hear more about mental health, health-related quality of life, and positive steps you can take on December 17th when our webinar features Dr. Ballou and Dr. Scholl. So with that, I thank you. I hope that you got some ideas for the gluten-free grains. Thank you for answering the poll. And references will be included with the posted presentation. In keeping with Remain Calm, I wish you a good day. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melinda. That was great. So we are at the time where we're going to start taking questions and giving you some answers. So if all three speakers could please come back onto the screen, that would be great. We have received quite a few questions. So if we don't get to them all today, don't worry. We will have our speakers answer them after, and we will post them with the recording of the webinar. So I want to start with nutrient deficiency, and this is a pretty common question we've seen today. If you're very nutrient deficient at diagnosis, how long does it take to see an improvement after starting a gluten-free diet? And does it vary by children and adults? And is it possible to avoid taking supplements if you're very strict with the diet from the beginning?
Well, I can start off with that. Yes, so it varies on the person. I'm going to talk about adults. It varies by age. It varies by the severity of the disease. We know that certain things like iron stores take about 6 to 12 months to replete in adults. That zinc deficiency can resolve after about a year, although that can change per person. We've seen later on with treated celiac lower zinc as well. We know that vitamin D is very common deficiency seen in the population. And we've also seen vitamin deficiencies persist after years on a gluten-free diet, such as the B vitamins being low in the diet, or low in levels, even after 10 years on a diet. It's very difficult if you're nutrient deficient to get your repletion from just foods. So we base a lot of this on our lab work that we follow carefully. And for that, I would say vitamin D, B12, iron, ferritin, folate if necessary, the other B vitamins if necessary. If somebody has steatorrhea, which is fatty, foul-smelling, frothy stool, diarrhea, we would check vitamin A and E and possibly a way to check K. So individual supplements are possible. If you're very deficient through food, it's not likely. Does anybody want to add to that?
I think I echo what you're saying. A lot of this is very individual, and working with your GI primary care dietitian. We're going to work off what the lab work is telling us, and we want to tune that specifically to that patient. So again, a general 1-a-day multivitamin is probably okay for everybody. And yes, if you're not severely nutrient deficient, you can get all the vitamins and minerals you need. without a supplement if you eat perfectly every day. So I haven't run across too many people who eat perfectly every day. So the multi is just a little insurance policy backup plan. But this is where good follow-up care is important. I think we do better with kids because of growth. We're concerned about their growth issues. So we have a more visible way to measure, we want to measure height, weight. And we do see adults as well as kids, but I think adults tend to get left behind in that area. So really, we suggest annually that you have that nutritional profile done. You should be checking in for follow-up. And again, kids we take pretty good care of, but the adults I think kind of get thrown to the side, and they don't get as good of follow-up care. So they need to be proactive on that.
If I could just mention D really quickly, to what Pam was saying, vitamin D is very hard for adults to find, to get enough in the diet alone. So almost all of our patients are on a vitamin D supplement, if not more.
I echo that as well. Even for kids, even if they are drinking milk, it's not always 100%. And so we really do, especially in the Northeast, I kind of start in the fall and make sure everyone's on their vitamin D until at least the summer. And then I start again nagging around the fall.
Great. Pam, can you talk to us about the term gluten reduced and gluten removed when talking about beer or other alcoholic beverages, and how people with celiac disease should interpret these labels?
You interpret them with a big no. So real quick, real simple, real dumb, no, that would be the simple answer to that. If you want more in depth, the FDA did define and looked at fermentable and hydrolyzed products. And their statement is that you really cannot test beer accurately. There's no good test to test these beers to see if they do indeed are gluten-free or not. So no, wholeheartedly, we do not recommend them. So stick with Redbridge or some of the other gluten-free beers, but no, they're not. The omissions, other things would be a big no. Sorry.
Great, thank you. So Tara, when should someone with celiac disease consider also using a low FODMAP diet or a total elimination diet? And who would be the one to make this decision, their doctor or in conjunction with the dietitian?
So great question. So what I tell everyone is take one step at a time. Sometimes it can take up to 18 months for a child to really feel better. And so I try to keep as many foods in their diet at all times because we're already removing a lot. So it's really kind of after we've sorted through everything, made sure there's no gluten getting in, and then we would kind of adjust and see what else we could do. Just as a note, when anyone starts the FODMAP diet, it's not meant to stay there. You're supposed to kind of reintroduce each group and see which foods you can put back in. And so sometimes I see people who really have eliminated too much, and we want to keep it in. As far as eliminating just single foods, like, everyone wants to eliminate dairy for some reason. And so, I really try hard not to do that as well. For younger children, when food is eliminated completely, they do have a higher risk of having an allergic reaction when a food is reintroduced. And so it's really important to have your team involved, the dietitian as well as the GI, and everyone on the same page of this is what we're going to try now, what's going to happen in 2 weeks, what's going to happen 2 weeks after that, and kind of have a really good laid out plan.
Great. So we've had lots of questions both about weight gain and on weight loss. So can you talk to us about why some people on a gluten-free diet will gain weight and others will lose weight, and how patients should know if they're on the right track?
Sure, I'll start that. So the literature shows that it's interesting. The literature's kind of all over the place. Patients on the gluten-free diet can lose weight to come back to a more stable weight. They can also gain weight. Their BMI tends to normalize. We've seen a lot. BMI is body mass index, tends to normalize on the gluten-free diet. We've seen data in all areas, but what we tend to see overall, to summarize, is that on the gluten-free diet, patients tend towards gaining weight. And that's for two reasons. The intestinal villi are healing, so now you're absorbing nutrients that you may not have been absorbing before. In fact, you're malabsorbing, right, to a certain extent. And then in addition, what you've heard us all talk about is the products aren't necessarily high in the nutrients. They're higher in the fat and calories and sugar and all of that. And that can surprise some people. When you look and see that one wheat bagel that we used to eat is equal to something like, someone can correct me, 3 3 gluten-free bagels. Or excuse me, 1 gluten-free bagel is equal to 3 wheat bagels when it comes to carbohydrates and calories. Don't quote me exactly on that, but it's very close. So those issues, we want to look at the overall quality of the diet. We don't want people to go on yet another diet for weight loss. So we're going to look at the overall quality. And as we sort of went over today, the grains, the healthy fats, the fruits, the vegetables, as much as possible, we don't get into restricting further if necessary. Does anyone else want to?
I just want to add, sometimes the weight loss piece kind of goes back to that slide I showed of when people just eliminate the food that had gluten in it and they don't replace it. And so they just start eating, say, just the protein in the vegetable and they forget about the starch. That's where I see that the weight loss happens. They're just not taking in enough because they're restricting, or that they don't, maybe, I'm picturing some teenagers of mine that I know, that they don't want to tell people, or that they then will just selectively eat things that are safe. And so they don't really have the full balance. So it's really just about getting the calories in.
Great.
And I do see weight loss with my patients on the gluten-free diet. Typically it's before, while they're with untreated celiac disease. And there, of course, are options for oral supplements if needed, but we're always going to start with food first. Well, thanks for bringing that up, Tara.
So Pam, is the approach to managing nutrition different in the elderly population with celiac disease? Does this group require different supplementation or management than people who are under, say, 70 years of age?
So, going back to what we talked about before, so I do want to say that once your celiac disease is well controlled, your intestines are absorbing the same as anybody else's intestines. So you can absorb those nutrients again, as long as your celiac disease is well controlled. So that's the first step. And again, unfortunately, our adult populations don't always get the follow-up that they need. So you want to be sure you're being followed by your gastroenterologist to make sure, that your gut has healed. If your gut is healed, you absorb nutrients just as you did before. Secondly, if you're getting good follow-up, you're also getting your labs done every year. So there's, again, the same nutrients, vitamins, minerals that are needed at that point should be looked at to make sure that everything is within the correct limits, so within normal limits.
Great. So Tara, oats are obviously a very controversial topic in the gluten-free community. As long as an oat product is labeled as gluten-free, is it okay for someone with celiac to eat?
The answer is yes. So what I sell is that everyone agrees on certain things. Regular oats. Oh, I'm unstable internet. Hold on. My internet was unstable, so I'm removing my video. Regular oats, everyone agrees, are not okay. They need to be labeled gluten-free. We also all agree that if a manufacturer puts on that it's gluten-free, that the manufacturer is saying that it's less than 20 parts per million. And the third thing we all agree on is that if oats are in your diet and you are still symptomatic or your TTG is still high, many physicians and dietitians will take oats out. So I think that's the one thing we all agree on. And I think we can agree that if it says gluten-free, we feel comfortable.
Great.
So I do want to speak to oats just for a moment. We have a protocol at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center Celiac Center where with a newly diagnosed patient with celiac disease, we do not introduce oats until we know that their TTG has reached a normal level and that their nutritional deficiencies have been resolved. And then we offer them the option to have gluten-free oats, and we gradually introduce those oats in small amounts. Ideally, you would then check the TTG again. Does this happen? No, almost never happens that people check their TTG again. But the point is that we'd like to see a well-healed gut before we do introduce pure uncontaminated labeled gluten-free oats, so that we don't have to worry about that confounding factor.
I have to say that's how we have been the Center for Celiac
I think what might be different.
is and I've pushed long and hard to change that, because when we talk about the nutritional deficiencies and what the gluten-free diet is lacking, oats replace a lot of that. less than 5% of the population cannot tolerate the protein in oats. So we do know that. So there are people who cannot tolerate the protein. It has nothing to do with the cross contact or the contamination, but they're so healthy. They're so good for this diet. So we started out at 12 months, and I would, at 6 months when they came back and were doing good, I kind of under the table slipped in the oats on them, and then I hounded Dr. Fasano and Dr. Leonard until we changed our policy. So we will initially put them in the diet. We follow kids at 3 months, we follow adults at 6 months. If there's problems, if there's concerns, if we're not seeing the change, and as Tara said, if there are problems, we pull the oats out. But I think there's such a nutritional value, and so few people can't tolerate them, that we have decided to, and this is very recent, we've just changed this. So again, it's a discussion that you need to have with your physician and dietitian and see where their protocol is, and why they're making these changes. And again, we've just recently changed.
Great. So we have a question from a family that says they're really struggling to afford the diet. They've had a child recently diagnosed with celiac disease, and an online group they're a part of is telling them that they must replace everything in their house. Can you guys talk to them about this?
Get offline, please. I often tease my families, because that's a question they will come up with when they have children. Should the whole household go gluten-free? And I say, you can all go gluten-free, or you can send your child to college. So what do you want to do? No. So, you do not need to replace everything. You do not need to rip out your kitchen and, buy everything new again. You need to be careful in taking those precautions. And some small children, yes, maybe the family will eat, if they're 2, 3, 4 that don't understand and want to eat what dad's eating or what their brother's eating. But you're right, the gluten-free diet is very expensive. So what we do encourage is to really focus on those things that are naturally gluten-free, building your diet around. There's so many things that are. So there's plenty of those fruits, those vegetables, the corn, the rice, the meats, the dairy. So we build our snacks around apples and peanut butter, or we do popcorn or yogurt, those types of things that are already gluten-free that don't add to the expense. And then we save the extra for the things, the pastas and the breads that need to be put in.
Great. So there have been really positive responses to all 3 of your presentations, and people really liking the idea of making changes in how that they're eating, and especially for their kids. But there's a few questions about picky eating children and how you encourage them to try these new types of grains and foods and just switch from those starchy, gluten-free alternatives to these ones that are better.
Well, I think was it Tara that said it the best. If it's not in your house, you can't eat it. Works both ways. So if I've gone grocery shopping, come home with $200 worth of great food, and my daughter will turn to me, there's nothing here to eat. So, but if I had those Oreos in the house, again, that's going to be gone. But I think you really have to purchase the foods that you like and serve the foods frequently. So if you serve a vegetable one and the child says, I don't like this. And then you say, okay, we'll never have that again. It's frequency, it's introducing, not pressuring them to eat, not forcing them to eat, but putting it out there and designing the menus and saying, this is what we're having. And I think Tara's presentation covered a lot of those great rules. I think she had some great ideas, for helping those picky eaters.
I would say, I just want to add, I know mine. Oh, I just want to add, I know I took my video off, so hopefully you guys I'm not breaking up. I would say to everyone to model. So the more they see you, the parents, they're people that they love eating it, the more that they might want to try it. I always laugh that if I make a sandwich, They want to eat mine, even if it's the exact same sandwich that they have in front of them, they still want mine, which is why I cut my sandwich into 6. I always have do another thing for fun to help them kind of get engaged are appetizers. So sometimes I put lots of things with toothpicks out it. Kids love toothpicks. They may try to, so anyway, you can gamify it as well. We started when the kids were young and I said, if you eat, 5 different fruits and vegetables today, that's a win. I never gave a prize. There was nothing there. And still they're like, Mom, I ate this and this and this. So it really just forces them to and encourages them to take ownership and be excited about it rather than it make it a chore.
Great. So we've had lots of questions on probiotics. When would you use probiotics with your patients, and when should a patient ask a dietitian or physician about starting one?
I think I'll start with that one. So just so we know, there are very few, minimal studies on probiotics in celiac disease. And the leading papers, the papers I've read say that there's no solid recommendation for probiotics in celiac disease right now. Everything is going to be a matter of, what the clinician and the patient have read, what the symptoms might be like, and then taking your best guess. Because if you think about it, what you're doing is introducing potentially healthy bacteria into a gut that already has certain numbers of strains of bacteria. You don't know what those are. And there's no study to say what probiotic belongs best in your body. So we're really cautious with probiotics. Having said that, they are out there. They're widely used. They're gone within 2 weeks if you stop taking them from your body. So there's minimal danger there. But you want to do this on a case-by-case basis on your symptoms with your doctor and dietitian. You want to make sure that they're labeled gluten-free. And I would encourage you to read the probiotic article that Thompson, and actually I helped her write it, on probiotics where there was some contamination of the growth media of a probiotic. So to grow the bacteria, they used, in this case, they accidentally used, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting, barley, again, don't quote me, and instead of what they normally use, which is molasses. So when they tested that, it came out high. Now, all I'm trying to say here is that we may need to look more at probiotics. We definitely have to look at the studies. We definitely have to apply the right probiotic to the right situation. And it's all in its infancy. So whenever possible, I try to go with probiotics from food first. And I will say that in the question and answer period, I'll put the right resource for you to read about the probiotics so that everyone has that to look at.
Great. So this is going to be our last question for today, but I think it's an important one. Everybody, wants to stick to a strict gluten-free diet and do their best to not be exposed to gluten. But how do you counsel your patients when they are exposed to gluten and they're feeling really bad? Is there anything they can do to help themselves, or how do you get them through that?
Unfortunately, you can help with the symptoms, but once you ingest it, it has to work through the system. I don't have any surefire, there's a lot of remedies to treat the symptoms, but if it's a one-time accidental exposure, hopefully the symptoms won't be too bad, but a lot of people think that they completely destroy the intestinal lining at that one time. You don't go back to ground zero. There will be some symptoms, but you're not going to totally destroy your villi and go back to March 3. And I always tell my patients from day one, yes, you're going to get exposed. I will 100% guarantee it. We live in a world of wheat and we live with humans. So chances of getting exposed are very high. You just use it as a learning opportunity. Try and treat the symptoms as best you can. But there's no, unfortunately, surefire way to get the gluten removed. Tara or Mel, do you have
I say the same thing. I say whatever you did before you were diagnosed when you were feeling yucky, that's what you should do. But now that even you know that you have celiac disease, that you would just treat your symptoms of what you did before.
That's right. For my patients, I tell them go back to easily digested food, make sure everything's well cooked, try to stay away from the raw vegetables and the salads for while you're feeling ill. Hydrate, definitely rest, and try to avoid, if you notice a difference, caffeine, chocolate, and alcohol while you're feeling unwell. They're all GI triggers.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Tara, Melinda, and Pam, for these excellent presentations and answering so many of the questions. And I know there's over 80 questions we didn't get to today, but we will send them to the speakers and we will have them posted on the NCA website with the videos. And I want to just again thank Lee and the wonderful team at NCA with Kim, and of course to all of you who participated in today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, please mark your calendars for our next webinar, which will be on December 17th. The topic is A New Perspective, the Psychology of Dealing with a Chronic Disease. And just once again, the videos will be posted on the NCA website along with all of our questions and answers. So thank you so much again for joining, and we hope to see you again next time.
Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.